You are listening to the Intelligent Vocalist Podcast, episode 143.
Welcome to the Intelligent Vocalist with John Henny. This is the podcast dedicated to help you be a smarter, better, more informed singer. And now, your host for the Intelligent Vocalist, John Henny.
Hey there, this is John Henny. Welcome back to another episode of The Intelligent Vocalist. I do so appreciate you spending your precious listening time with me. All right, if you want to bring up a topic that will bring almost unilateral exasperation amongst voice teachers, and voice teachers don't always agree with a lot, but one thing that seems to get them a little bothered is this trend of breathy singing. And it's not that breathy singing isn't a legitimate vocal color. I think Billie Eilish has demonstrated that there is certainly a market for this. And the reason being is it can create really interesting textures within the voice when done properly. But the problem that you often see with singers, with students, is that they will overdo the breathy singing, or they don't understand how the breathy singing is utilized, how to make variances in their breathiness, and when it's more appropriate and less appropriate. I've said this before, but when you are singing breathy in a recording studio, you are singing into very sensitive, very delicate and expensive microphones that pick up every nuance. You're singing it in a very controlled environment. There's no other sound going on, so that they're able to, when they're picking up your voice, they don't have to worry about anything leaking or bleeding into the microphone and messing up the track. And also, of course, when they mix and produce it, they can set your vocal perfectly within the music. When you go to live singing, that is not the case at all. You are singing into a different type of microphone. They're not as sensitive. And the nuances are going to be lost the thicker and more intense your music gets. I play a bit of very kind of clunky guitar, but I love the guitar. It's a wonderful, fun instrument. I recommend it to everyone. It's so rhythmic, and it's just the way you hold it. It's a beautiful thing. And all singers should learn to play an instrument on some level. That's my belief. But guitar players, and they will debate the tonal quality of one type of wood over another, even the weight of the guitar, what it does to the tone quality, etc. And then, as people will point out, and none of that matters once the bass and drums start playing. And these little nuances that you're trying to do live will be completely lost once the music comes in. It's just going to be swallowed up. And quite frankly, you're not in a protected environment. In other words, there's lots of sound, stage sound coming into your microphone. And if the sound person has to turn you up to the point where people can hear you over the instruments, you're going to likely get feedback, that annoying ring. You can't turn the mics up that loud. So you have to sing with a bit more intensity when you're live. So your breathiness has to have different levels depending on the situation that you are in. Now, you can still have breathy texture, but it likely can't be as breathy as when you are in the studio. Now, let's talk about being in the studio. You can be as breathy as you want to be. But if you listen to singers that utilize this effect from Billie Eilish, Shawn Mendes, Lana Del Rey, lots of contemporary singers. What they will do is they will vary the shades of breathiness. And what I see with developing singers is that they just hear breathiness, and so they think they just have to sound really breathy. And it's this very monochromatic, colorless, non-changing breathy tone that gets a little boring. And what you want to be able to do is play with levels of breathiness. Now, what is the difference between breathiness and a full tone? Well, when you are exhaling air and you're making no sound, the vocal cords are separated, they're apart. And what they do to phonate, to make sound, is they come together and they buzz like a trumpet player's lips. Imagine you've blown up a balloon. We've all done this at some time or another. We've done it at kids. I may have done it more recently. I won't admit to it. But you blow up a balloon and you pinch that top and you get that ring, you get that squeaky sound. Now, if you let it go slightly slack, you kind of, the air starts to rush out. And that's somewhat akin to a breathy sound. The balloon obviously is not as malleable as our vocal folds. So we have a little more control and nuance over the vocal folds, so you won't quite get the breathy effect with the balloon, but that's the idea. So number one, when you're singing breathy, you got to be careful how much breath you are blowing out because you'll quickly run out of air. Breathiness, that sound, is unutilized air. This closing together of the vocal folds, they are compressing the air. They're compressing the air molecules together and building up energy. And the more energy you build, the more intense the sound wave, the louder you're going to be, and then you can work your resonance to create fuller tones, etc. But the breathiness is going to create a rather weak sound wave that's not going to have a lot of energy, especially in the higher parts of the tone. Imagine like an EQ system where, and I should explain what EQ is. Somebody commented they don't know what EQ is. It's equalization. And in the way back when everybody had those big old blasters and you'd put the tape in it and you had the little EQ, the little bands that you could boost a little more bass, a little more mids, a little more treble. That kind of interaction has gone away with the advent of streaming and listening on your phones, etc. People don't pay as much attention, but we used to play around with the EQ, and your resonance is like an EQ system, the way you shape your mouth and your throat. But when the sound waves come when they're breathy, there's not as much energy in the highs, right? And so you can't really be as loud. It's just not going to be as loud no matter what you do with the vowels, etc. And you can play with what is called the closed quotient. Now, the closed quotient is how long the vocal folds are staying together. What percentage of time as they're opening and closing are they together as opposed to open? And to explain this, just imagine you're singing a note, an A 220, which is the A below middle C. Your vocal folds are opening and closing 220 times a second, which is remarkable, but they can open and close over 1,000 times a second. It's incredible. But the 220 times a second, now in that cycle of opening and closing, if they just stay closed just for a very, very small fraction of a second and then they're open longer, you have a low closed quotient. If they're staying closed longer, they open quickly and close again, you have a higher closed quotient. So at 0%, you have no sound. I mean, it's just pure breathiness. At 100%, you have no sound. You've just clamped your chords together. And in between 0 and 100, you go from a breathy sound to a more balanced sound to then it starts to be a pressed sound and it starts to sound choked off. And breathiness is going to sit on the low part of that closed quotient. But you don't want to use just one level of closed quotient. That's going to sound really dull and boring. One thing I keep hammering to singers is you need to keep giving the listener new information. You need to change up things. Now, some singers will change up things in the extreme, and let's say the next time they go to the chorus, they start changing the melody and adding lots of riffs. Or a really good example of that is the Disturbed, the Sound of Silence. And he's going from breathy to a full sound to this really distorted sound. And so he's giving all these different textures. And of course, it went totally viral and huge. It's a vocal tour de force. But you can also do it more subtly. And that's what these breathy artists are doing. Now, usually the breathiness is in the verse. And the breathiness will change from verse to verse. The second verse might be a little less breathy than the first, but even within the verse itself, the first verse, even within lines, they will very often do very small, minute changes to the breathiness. And you can feel yourself do that. You can play with that by just holding a tone and letting it be really breathy. And then you can just feel yourself add a little more and that change of the level of breathiness just adds a little more interest to the listener. It reawakens the ear. Just as I'm speaking to you, if I held my voice at an absolutely flat monotone, and if I made everything that I said exactly the same in terms of texture and tone color, it gets boring really fast. And you'll tune out. I will be even more boring than sometimes I think I managed to get on these podcasts. But I do appreciate you listening. Oh, I said that. But when you play with that, you add a little breathiness and then you take it away, and then a little breathiness and take it away. That's what you want to do. Again, the mistake is just the sameness of the breathy tone. So when you listen to someone who sings breathy, here's my challenge. I want you to listen really, really closely. And that's important for a singer, is you need to listen to other singers much more deeply than a casual listener does. Your listening skills should be very different, and you should be listening to all different types of things. And one of the things that you should be listening for is the tone color and the intensity and how the singer changes it. And what do they do to change it? How are they changing things up? Are they making the vowels a little more rounded so everything sounds just smoother and warmer? Or are they getting everything a little brighter so everything has a little more bite and edge? I mean, we do this in our speaking voices. You are going to talk to your significant other very differently than you are going to talk to someone checking you out at the grocery store. At least I hope so, because you're going to be really freaking weird and creep the grocery store attendant out. But we have all these different colors in our voices, and we need to bring this to our singing. And so I want you to really listen. When you're listening to a breathy singer, do you just hear breathiness? Is there just one level? Or is there something more? Are they playing with the levels of breathiness? Now, some singers, what they'll do is if they're going to keep at the same level of breathiness, maybe they'll start to stack their vocal or bring in other elements. There's constantly changing elements in the vocal performance. And again, it doesn't have to be anything big. and over the top, it can be really subtle little shifts. And all you are doing is you are playing with the closed quotient. You're playing with how much the vocal folds are resisting the air. And it's going to be usually easier to find in your lower register. And you can just do a very simple exercise, short scale, try it really breathy, then add a little more, See if you can keep that core. And by what I mean core is that buzzing of the folds, that when you go breathy, you don't lose that. You still maintain a bit of in the breathiness. The good singers have that core. They keep a certain amount of energy because you want to project energy as a singer. You don't want to be dull. You don't want to sound bored or tired unless you're really going for a very, very certain vibe. But just play with that breathiness, find the variation and the colors within, and you'll be much more effective as a singer. Hey, if you want to know more about me, please visit my website, johnhenny.com. And if you want to learn about the complete opposite of breathy singing, check out my How to Sing Belt course. It's called Boldly Belting. Just go to boldlybelting.com. And I've found a kind of unique way to help bridge the gap between exercises and songs, and I work your voice to getting some really intense high belt sounds. So, hey, and keep spreading the word about the podcast. I really, really appreciate it. If you want to help out, you can share it. You can also go to iTunes, leave a review. I'd really, really appreciate it. And until next time, to better singing. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.